Hello and welcome to The Hindu. I'm Priyali Prakash and you're watching Tipping Point, our weekly show where we look at climate events and the trends shaping our future. In this week's episode, we will discuss the United Kingdom's Climate and Nature Bill, how extreme weather events disrupted school education in 2024, and sand batteries. Our main story this week is the United Kingdom's Climate and Nature Bill, which would have made its climate commitments legally binding but fell through in Parliament last week. The Climate and Nature Bill was introduced by Liberal Democrat MP for South Cotswolds, Rose Savage.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time. The Climate and Nature Bill has been 4 years in the making, and the enormous amount of support it's garnered from campaigners, trade unions, scientists, faith leaders, NGOs, businesses, and especially young people means that it is both an honour and an enormous responsibility to set out what this bill entails, what it adds to existing law, and why I believe it addresses the most important existential challenge of our generation, the intertwined climate and nature crises.
It was supported by many Labour MPs too. Apart from demanding that the UK mandatorily achieve its climate and nature targets, the bill also required the Secretary of State to implement a strategy to achieve those targets and the formation of a Climate and Nature Assembly to advise the Secretary of State. The bill would have made it a duty of the Secretary of State to ensure that the UK achieves its emission reduction targets listed under the nationally determined contributions and that it fulfills its obligations and commitments under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. The United Kingdom's current NDCs were announced at COP29 in November 2024 and call for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 81% below 1990 levels by 2035. In his speech at the climate conference, Prime Minister Keir Starmer also committed to achieving 100% clean power by 2030 through Labour's Global Clean Power Alliance.
So at this COP, I was pleased to announce that we're building on our reputation as a climate leader, with the UK's 2035 NDC target to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions by at least 81% on 1990 levels. Our goal of 1.5 degrees is aligned with our goals for growth.
According to the government, the target aligns with the UK's share in limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels as required under the Paris Agreement. However, according to Climate Action Tracker, even though the 2035 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target aligns with the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, its fair share is more than what it does domestically. The UK government has said in its November statement that the target does not include international aviation and shipping. A few days ago, UK media outlet The Guardian in an exclusive report said that Labour MPs were ordered to oppose the bill, as it would mean that the UK has to follow the climate-related targets it set at COP and other international forums. Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves also recently said that growth and not net zero is the government's focus area. This statement, coupled with the unwillingness of the UK parliamentarians to make climate targets legally binding, cast a shadow of doubt over how serious they actually are about meeting their emissions reduction target and other climate-related goals.
I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Just last week, a report written by the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries who we know are very, by their very nature, cautious people, said that if we continue on our current path, then a plausible worst case is that global GDP will collapse by 50% between 2070 to 2090, and that 4 billion lives could be lost by 2050. It's an unimaginable future. So would the Shadow Minister not agree that the cost of doing nothing is going to be way, way, way more than the cost of acting now?
The House voted 120 to 7 in favour of adjourning the debate for now. The discussion on the bill is likely to resume on July 11, 2025. In our extreme weather event segment this week, we are not looking at a particular incident, but rather how such events over the course of time have threatened education for children. According to an analysis by UNICEF, school education for at least 242 million students in 84 countries or territories was disrupted due to heat waves, tropical storms, floods, droughts, and other extreme weather events in 2024. This is almost 10% of the world's entire population of children. Also, 74% of students affected by extreme weather events are in low or lower middle income countries, with a Children's Climate Risk Index of 7 out of 10. The Children's Climate Risk Index was a parameter introduced by UNICEF in 2019 and ranks countries based on how vulnerable their children are to environmental stresses and extreme weather events. When the index was introduced, it also found that around 1 billion children in the world live in extremely high-risk countries. In 2024, South Asia was the most affected region, with 128 million students affected by climate-related school disruptions. In our previous episodes, we have highlighted how South Asia disproportionately faces the brunt of climate change. Heat waves caused the most disruptions to school education, and April was the worst month. Tropical cyclones and drought were other big causes that disrupted schools in 2024. India ranks 26 out of 163 on Children's Climate Risk Index, with 1 being the worst impacted. To enhance the capacity of teachers in climate change education, UNICEF is working with educators in the country, and a national teacher training module is set to be finalized in March 2025. Our Climate Hope story this week are sand batteries. The concept of using sand for thermal energy is not new. Street vendors in India have used it for decades to warm groundnuts and popcorn, and people in Turkey use it to prepare hot coffee. Polar Night Energy, a Finnish company in the field of high-temperature thermal energy storage systems, uses this concept in its sand batteries, which have the potential to reduce emissions. The battery developed by Polar Night Energy uses sand or similar materials as its storage medium. According to the organization, the battery system uses electricity from the grid or locally available renewable sources. This energy is transferred to the sand battery using a closed-loop heat transfer system. This heat is discharged through an exchanger as needed. The company also says that the system charges when clean and low-cost electricity is available. According to the International Energy Agency, heat is the primary end use in energy sector and accounted for almost half of the global final energy consumption and nearly 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions in 2023. Annual heat demand expanded 7% globally between 2017 and 2023. As such, it is important to explore alternate heat energy options. The sand battery is capable of delivering hot water, steam, or air at temperatures up to 400 degrees Celsius. The system is not very sensitive to sand grain size and can therefore use high-density, low-cost materials which are not in high demand for construction or other sectors. Sand is capable of retaining heat for months. Polar Night Energy says that the system is designed to be charged and discharged around 20 to 200 times per year. Currently, sand battery solutions from Polar Night Energy are available for larger industrial and commercial applications and not for domestic use. That's all from this week's Tipping Point. Thank you for watching. If you found this discussion insightful, please subscribe to The Hindu.